Doamnelor și domnilor, Brent King.
Thank you. So, we are going to open the time capsule in 2041, is that right? Or 2051? 2051, okay. So I am going to take you on a journey tonight to 2040 and 2050 to see what the world is like. And particularly, I want to talk about what Moldova will be like in 20 or 30 years' time. My job is a futurist. We joke that being a futurist means you're never wrong today. But I hope that some of the things I will teach you about tomorrow will be of interest for you. Now, when we look at the problems that are facing the world today, the biggest problem, people are uncertain about the future because of these things like COVID and other pandemics coming. We have a big problem in countries like the United States with inequality, the gap between the richest and the poorest people. There's a French economist, his name is Thomas Piketty. He says that the United States has the highest inequality of any nation we've seen at any time in history. This is a big problem for stability. But we have two very big events coming over the next 20 years. The emergence of artificial intelligence and the change in our climate. The biggest problem associated with climate change is not only warming temperatures, but also sea level rise. This is what New York City might look like in the year 2100 because of sea level rise. And there are 500 cities around the world that are going to be affected by this. In fact, the estimates are that more than 1 billion people will be displaced because of these changes in the environment. There are specific countries that have big problems like the Maldives or Bangladesh that are going to be affected by sea level rise much more than obviously Moldova. And when we look at the United States, Miami is going to be the #1 city affected by sea level rise in the second half of this century. 90% of the Miami population will be displaced by sea level rise. So some people debate when this is going to happen, but we believe the biggest changes will come in the 2040s, in about 20 years' time. The biggest problem is access to food, because a lot of farmland will be affected by higher temperatures and by increased floodwaters from sea level rise. If you're in a city or a country affected by this extreme weather, you'll try to move somewhere to keep your family safe. So in the 2040s, a lot of people will be moving everywhere around the planet because of these changing weather cycles. Some cities, like Phoenix in Arizona in the United States, or Dubai, or Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, we don't know how people are going to live in those cities in 2050 when the temperatures could get as high as 60 degrees Celsius during the summer. So either we have to improve our engineering for humans to live in hotter weather, or people have to move. So I mentioned before that we see about 1 billion people moving because of these problems. In Europe, we have this crisis of refugees now. And this year, we think maybe 40,000 refugees will come into the EU because of the Syrian situation, Libya, and so forth. But imagine 1 billion people, or the biggest estimate is 1.6 billion people. How are we going to cope with this as a planet? Well, this is where it gets interesting, because under the current system of governance around the world and the way we think about capitalism, we don't really have a solution from the free market to solve a problem of this scale. So this problem is going to require humanity to think differently about economics and maybe even philosophy, what it means to be the human species. and how we need to support our fellow humans. The question people ask today about refugees and immigration is they say, who is going to pay for this? But when there's 1 billion or 1.6 billion people displaced by climate, we can't really ask that question anymore. You can't put a monetary value on 1 billion lives. This really doesn't work. So we need to think about different solutions. Now, this is important for Moldova. I've heard the number of times since I came here that people saying the young people, they're moving to Romania or they're moving to the EU for jobs. How do we keep the young people here? Why this is important is because we know that the way you grow your economy, one of the main ways is you have babies or you have immigration. You have people come into your country. So you can see countries like Portugal and others now having this digital nomad visa, trying to encourage people to move to their economy because immigrants buy houses, they buy clothes, they buy iPhones. This consumption creates economic growth. So already today, 50 countries around the world are trying to attract immigrants into the country. When Moldova enters the European Union, this will be a great opportunity for Moldova to enter this phase of attracting immigrants. Because we could argue the quality of life is very good in Moldova. It's cheaper than living in some other European nations. You have good wine here. You know, all of these things we could use to attract this talent to the country. But by the 2050s, when we open the time capsule, the world's economies are going to be very different. We call them smart economies because the biggest economies in the world in 2050 will be run by artificial intelligence. Now, this sounds maybe like science fiction, but if you've seen what's happening with ChatGPT or programs like Midjourney, DALL-E, the progress in artificial intelligence is speeding up. So if you want an economy that is resource efficient, that is advanced in terms of technologies, you're going to be using as much artificial intelligence as possible to compete. So there's going to be two types of economies in the 2050s. Smart economies, powered by artificial intelligence, and dumb economies that are still thinking like the 20th century. In this mix, this means China will become the world's #1 economy, beating the United States because of their investment in technology infrastructure. They have more electric vehicles in China than in any other country in the world today. They have deployed more solar energy in the last 2 years than the United States has deployed since the 1950s. So China is investing in becoming a smart economy. And the US is trying to slow them down in this respect, trying to reduce access to microchips and things like this because they know what is coming. What does the world look like when China is the #1 economy? It changes the geopolitics significantly. We also will have smart cities as part of smart economies. If you live in a smart city, you will get to work in a robot taxi. If you order food, it will be delivered by a robot drone. And the next technology is not going to be a new iPhone or a new Samsung smartphone. Within the next couple of years, we will start wearing computers on our face as smart glasses. 2 days ago, Meta, we used to call them Facebook, they released their first generation of their smart glasses. This is not technology that's going to happen in 10 years. This is happening today. Smart glasses mean you'll be able to have your own personal artificial intelligence, like an assistant that is with you 24/7 that can help you with any tasks you might have. And this AI will get to know you so well then you'll think of it like your best friend. How we power economies with artificial intelligence is this concept called smart contracts. These are basically legal contracts or corporations and businesses set up with artificial intelligence at the heart of the business. When you use smart contracts, it is designed so machines can run the business activity. To do this, you need programmable money. You need technologies that can be shared across border. You need certain standards on artificial intelligence agreed upon. Things like regulations and ethics around the safe operation of autonomous vehicles. We'll be using smart contracts for things like managing our healthcare. And in the 2040s, we will start to see the first commercial life extension technologies, where you'll be able to live longer because of technologies in this space. So this changes our view of economics significantly. In the 1800s, Adam Smith wrote a book called The Wealth of Nations, and in it he described basic supply and demand economics. And the idea was, if we have a product, say like an iPhone, and it's very popular, and you need to produce more iPhones, the way you used to do this was put more people in the factory. But in smart economies, it doesn't work like that. Because in smart economies, supply is dictated by robots and the automation in the factory, not by human workers. So the biggest problem with smart economies is it takes humans out of the workforce. And this is a challenge that we're really not sure how to fix. And there's two potential outcomes for that. One is that we have lots of social unrest because people can't find work because AIs have taken the jobs. Or we create new jobs for humans, or maybe we do something like universal basic income. China is leading the world in the smart contract arena, and part of this is their success with digital money. They are 10 years ahead of the United States in respect to central bank digital currencies. But when you pair that with the Belt and Road, you can see that China is creating smart contract infrastructure so that they can have an autonomous economy in the 2050s. The United States still thinks very much in 19th century or 20th century terms about trade. And so China will also use this automation to try and reduce the influence of the United States and the US dollar. Maybe the euro and the US dollar in the future will become one currency. But actually, probably we are going to have lots of different currencies in the future, but we won't understand them because they'll be generated by artificial intelligence as a better way to measure economic activity. So in the 2050s, a large portion of our economics in the EU, in the United States, in China, in India, will be smart economies run by artificial intelligence. Maybe half of the economy by 2050 will be run by AI. Maybe not that much, but certainly that will be the trajectory. For Moldova, this means that the big opportunity is to develop infrastructure for autonomous trade. And you can see with maib Park that we are investing in a future of technology development and digital services in Moldova. So this is a good sign. But if we want to attract talent and business to Moldova, we'll need to have these solutions. Now that's the bad news. Lots of change and lots of disruption. But the good news is we have all the technology we need to solve the biggest problems that we will face for the next 30 years. And it starts with energy. Already solar is cheaper and wind energy is cheaper than any fossil fuel-based generation today. But in the 2040s, we will have nuclear fusion reactors that essentially make energy production very, very cheap. And energy availability is very important for the growth of industries. We'll also change the way we think about energy management. We'll have to have lots of batteries to store renewable energy. This is a solar battery farm in South Australia that was built by Tesla. Today, 100% of South Australia's energy is met by solar. But the only way they can do that is with batteries, because the sun doesn't work at night for some reason, right? And so we are going to have to change the design of our grids. In cities, we will put a lot more solar and wind generation in cities. Maybe in 2050, my park, the windows will actually be solar panels that generate electricity. This technology we're working on today. The biggest industry in the 2040s will be climate mitigation, climate response. We think up to 20% of global GDP will be spent on climate in the 2040s and 2050s. Biggest employer. And one of the big areas we'll be working on is carbon capture, trying to take carbon out of the atmosphere and capture that. And then we'll use that carbon for new construction techniques, maybe creating better batteries and things like this. We talk about gene therapy, AI-based diagnostics, and even longevity. So in the future, your personal AI will help you manage your health so you live longer. Your AI will know more about your health than any doctor that is around. And your doctor, the first point will be to check with your AI, and check the doctor will have his own AI to give you a better diagnosis. And for Moldova, what is the agriculture industry going to look like? Well, it's going to be robot-based. You're not going to have people doing farming unless they're controlling robots. So whether it is automated tractors, or whether it's drones checking the fields, this is a big opportunity for Moldova to take some leadership across the region in agricultural production. We know that some of these vertical farms are 90% more efficient in terms of water use. But you know, you hear the stories about climate change, that one of the biggest problems is the cows. They create a lot of carbon, right? So what will we have in the future? We won't have cows, we'll have e-cows, like lab-grown steak. And maybe it's going to be better for you, I don't know. It depends, I think, on the standards that we create. But what about the wine industry in Moldova? It's a big industry, right? Well, we know in the Bordeaux region in France that by 2040, France will no longer be able to make the wine because the temperature will be too high. Do we move the wineries to better locations? You know, in the EU, Scotland and England, Britain, will become wine-producing countries because of the change in temperature. But France is investing now in wine labs, just like meat labs, to create wine in a lab. Because wine, after all, is just a mix of chemicals. So if you can get the chemicals right, you could produce wine in a lab. But again, the biggest issue will be climate resilience. So as we close this, I would like you to think about how is the world going to mobilize around climate? It probably looks something like the Second World War. Big global effort, factories trying to build new equipment to make cities capable of withstanding extreme weather events. So for each of you and for Moldova, I'll leave you with these key messages. The trick is being adaptable, to be able to change quite quickly. Because with both artificial intelligence and climate change, humans have never faced two challenges like this happening simultaneously in just the space of 20 or 30 years. So we have to be adaptable. We have to be able to change quite quickly. And for businesses like maib, now it's about digital scale. You heard about the investments in mobile technology that's so important for the growth of companies in the future. Because the fastest growing companies in the world today all are based on digital technologies and digital scale. This also means that the way humans live in the world side by side with AI is going to create a lot of stress and pressure. So maybe one of the big businesses will be psychology, helping us cope with these changes that are happening. And I think the main thing is people that will be successful in 2050 are people that make the decision today to work with these new technologies and embrace change. There are two kinds of people in Moldova when it comes to artificial intelligence. Those that will work with artificial intelligence and those whose jobs will be taken by AI. Right? So leaving you with this thought, these are the competing systems that the world is going to face over this next 30 years. But the two competing ecosystems that will probably face us is the European and Chinese thinking, what I like to call optimal humanity, and the US thinking, super capitalism powered by AI. We think that the US system has a strong chance of winning, but the problem with capitalism in this future world of climate change and AI is that money is not a good measure of value systems. And so if the US wins this philosophical fight, it could be a big problem for humans. But if we choose to use technology for every human, it's going to be much better. Elon Musk he just tweeted today actually, in 15 years, he hopes there will be a base on Mars with thousands of people working on Mars. But what would the economy on Mars be like? Would it be based on capitalism? Well, no, because if you have these people move to Mars and they're trying to survive, the number one goal of Martian colonists would be to make sure they have enough food, air, and water to survive if the ships stop coming from Earth. And so this would create a very different economic driver, sustainability and prosperity for the colony. But my hope is that climate change and AI creates this type of sustainable prosperity view for humans on the planet, that we start to work together around the world to make sure every human has a good quality of life. Every human has access to food, education, good health care. The only reason we wouldn't do it is based on politics and policy, not technology. But the future of humanity depends on one thing. The most important thing, that we all work together. Because the more divided we are, the less success we will have as a species. So I'll leave you with that thought. If you're interested in more of this, you can check out my book, The Rise of Techno-Socialism, And thank you very much for coming to Maib Park today, and I hope I've given you some wisdom.
Anul present brought to you by our maib CEO, Georgi Shanice, urmează de partea maib, care se urmărează